Elijah Thornton's hands shook as he pressed 2 fingers against the woman's frozen throat. Nothing. He pressed harder, breath clouding the winter air, and barely there a pulse. Around her, 5 small bodies lay motionless in the snow. Children who'd run out of time to be children. He'd lost his own family to fever 3 winters back. Hadn't saved them. Couldn't. But tonight, with frost burning his lungs and the storm howling like the dead, he'd be damned if he buried anyone else. Before we begin, if this story touches your heart, subscribe and stay until the end. You won't believe what happens when the whole town turns against him. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all started. The blizzard hit Thornton's Ridge 3 days before Christmas 1876, and it came with the kind of cold that killed quick. Elijah Thornton stood at his forge hammer raised when the first gust rattled his cabin walls. The fire in the hearth sputtered. He lowered the hammer, listened. Nothing but wind. He turned back to the horseshoe glowing red on his anvil. Then he heard it. Not wind, not an animal. Something else. A cry, maybe. Or maybe just ghosts. He'd been hearing ghosts for 3 years now, ever since he'd buried his wife Sarah and their 2 boys in the frozen ground behind the church. Reverend Hart said grief played tricks on a man's mind. Elijah figured the Reverend was probably right. He set the hammer down. The sound came again, fainter this time, swallowed by the storm. "Hell," he muttered and grabbed his coat. The snow stood knee-deep by the time he stepped off his porch. Wind cut through his wool like it was nothing. He pulled his hat low, tucked his chin, and walked into the white. His boots crunched. His breath froze. Every step was work, but Elijah Thornton had been working all his life in the war in the mines at the forge, and he knew how to keep moving. When moving made no sense. He followed the sound until he couldn't hear it anymore, then kept going. The trees groaned above him, heavy with ice. A branch cracked somewhere in the dark, then another. He pushed through a snowdrift and stopped. At the base of a fallen pine, half buried in white, lay a woman. Her long black hair had frozen to her back. Her hands were locked around something, someone. Children. 5 of them curled against her like pups against a dying mother. None of them moved. Elijah dropped to his knees. "Hey!" His voice came out rough. He touched the woman's shoulder. Ice cracked under his fingers. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat. Cold skin. No pulse. He pressed harder, moved his fingers, tried again. There. Faint as a whisper. His chest tightened. "All right," he said to himself, or to her, or to God, he didn't know. "All right, we're getting you inside." He reached for the smallest child first, a girl no older than 3. Her lips were blue. He pulled her free from the woman's arms, wrapped her in his coat, tucked her against his chest. Her skin felt like stone. "Stay with me, little one." He stood, turned toward home, and ran. The cabin wasn't far, 1/4 mile maybe, but it felt like 10. His legs burned. His lungs screamed. The girl in his arms didn't move, didn't make a sound, and that silence was worse than any cry. When he kicked open his door, the heat from the forge hit him like a fist. He laid her on the floor by the hearth, pulled a wool blanket over her, and ran back into the storm. 4 more trips. His arms went numb. His beard turned to ice, but he made it. One by one he brought them in, a boy around 7, another girl maybe 5, a boy no bigger than 6, and a baby who couldn't have been more than a year old. He set them side by side on blankets close to the fire, but not too close. They didn't wake, just curled tighter when the warmth touched them, like they'd forgotten what warmth felt like. The woman came last. Elijah wrapped his arms under her shoulders and carried her like a bride. She weighed nothing. Bones under leather. He laid her beside the fire, brushed the snow from her face with the hem of his shirt, and checked her pulse again. Still there. Barely. "Come on," he whispered. "Don't quit on me now." He stoked the fire higher, hung a pot of water over the flames, and set to work. Dry clothes first. He had shirts, old ones from before. He didn't look when he changed them. Just worked fast, kept his eyes down, treated it like field medicine. When he finished, he wrapped them tighter and stepped back. The cabin was silent, except for the hiss of wet wood and the tick of melting snow dripping from the rafters. Elijah sank into his chair and stared at them. Apache by the look of her. That would mean trouble come morning. But trouble was a problem for the living, and right now these 6 were barely that. He ladled stew into bowls, set bread to warm on the stove, and waited. An hour passed, then 2. The woman stirred first. Her fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttered. Then her eyes opened dark, sharp, and full of panic. She bolted upright, gasped, and her gaze shot around the cabin like a cornered animal. Elijah didn't move, didn't speak, just let her look. She counted the children, silent, fast. Her hand reached for the smallest one, pulled her close. Then she looked at him. "You're safe," Elijah said quietly. "All of you." She didn't answer, just stared at him with eyes that had seen too much. He nodded toward the bowl beside her. "There's food. You should eat." She didn't touch it, didn't move, just held the baby tighter and watched him like he might turn into something worse. Elijah understood. He'd been a soldier. He knew what happened when trust got broken too many times. "I'm not going to hurt you," he added, "and I'm not going to put you back out there." Still nothing. He stood slowly, walked to the stove, and poured himself coffee. When he sat back down, he kept his distance. The fire crackled between them. Minutes passed. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she spoke. "Why?" Her voice was raw, scraped down to nothing. Elijah looked at her over the rim of his cup. "Because it was the right thing to do. White men don't do right things." He didn't argue. Couldn't really. She wasn't wrong. "Maybe not," he said, "but I'm doing it anyway." She studied him for a long time, then reached for the bowl. She took one bite, then another, slow at first, then faster, like her body remembered hunger. Elijah turned his attention to the children. The oldest boy was waking now, eyes wide and frightened. He sat up, looked at the woman his mother Elijah guessed, and whispered something in a language Elijah didn't understand. She answered in the same tongue, soft and steady. The boy nodded, then looked at Elijah with suspicion carved into every line of his young face. Elijah pushed the bread closer. "Go on." The boy hesitated, then took it, tore a piece, gave it to the girl beside him. "What's your name?" Elijah asked. The boy glanced at his mother. She said nothing. Neither did he. "All right," Elijah said. "Fair enough." The woman set her bowl down. "You live alone?" "Yes." "Why?" Elijah's jaw tightened. "Wife and boys died. Fever." Something shifted in her expression. Not pity, just recognition. She nodded once. "How long were you out there?" he asked. 3 days, maybe 4. His stomach turned. "With no fire?" "Had one. Then men came." Elijah's hands curled into fists. "What men?" "White men. Said we were on their land. Said we had no right." She looked at the children. "They took everything." "They leave you out there to die." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Elijah stood and walked to the window. The storm was fading now, the wind settling into a low moan. Outside, the snow glittered under the moonlight like broken glass. "They'll come looking," the woman said behind him. He turned. "Let them." "You don't understand. They'll take my children. They'll take me. Not if I have anything to say about it." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're one man." "I've been one man before." She studied him again, and this time her gaze lingered. "You're a fool." "Probably." The baby whimpered. The woman scooped her up, rocked her gently, and began to hum. It was a low, mournful sound, older than the cabin, older than the town. The other children shifted closer to her, drawn by the melody. Elijah watched them, something tightening in his chest. He'd forgotten what a family looked like, forgotten the sound of small voices, the weight of small hands, forgotten what it felt like to be needed. He turned back to the window. "What's your name?" She didn't answer right away. Then, so quietly, he barely heard it. "Ayanna." He nodded. "Elijah." "Elijah?" she repeated, like she was testing the weight of it. Then, "Thank you." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The night stretched on. The children fell asleep one by one, curled together like a litter of kittens. Ayanna stayed awake, watching the fire, watching him. Elijah sat in his chair and carved a piece of cedar he'd been meaning to finish for months. The knife moved slow and steady in his hands, shaving away slivers of wood until something took shape. A horse. Small, simple. When he finished, he set it on the table. Ayanna glanced at it but said nothing. Outside, the storm finally broke. The wind died. The snow stopped falling. The world went still. And for the first time in 3 years, Elijah Thornton didn't feel like the last man alive. But peace, he knew, never lasted long. By dawn, the sky had cleared to a pale, merciless blue. Elijah woke stiff in his chair neck, crooked, the carving knife still in his hand. The fire had burned low. He blinked, rubbed his face, and looked toward the hearth. Ayanna was awake. She sat with her back against the wall, the baby asleep in her lap, the other children pressed close around her. Her eyes were on the door. "You didn't sleep," Elijah said. "No." He stood stretched and added wood to the fire. The flames licked at the dry bark, catching quick. Heat rolled into the room. "There's more stew," he offered. "I can heat it up." "We should leave." He turned. "What?" "We should leave," she repeated, her voice flat. "Before they come." "Ayanna, you don't know what they'll do to you." She looked at him now, and there was something fierce in her gaze. "They'll call you a traitor. They'll burn this place down. They'll kill you if they think you're hiding us. Let them try. You're being foolish." "Maybe." He crossed his arms. "But I'm not putting you back out there. Not you, not them." The oldest boy, Elijah still didn't know his name, sat up, rubbing his eyes. He looked at Ayanna, then at Elijah, then back at his mother. He said something in their language. Ayanna answered, and the boy's face hardened. "What did he say?" Elijah asked. Ayanna hesitated. "He asked if you were going to sell us." Elijah's jaw clenched. He knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. "I'm not going to sell you. I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to let anyone else hurt you either. Understand?" The boy stared at him, unblinking. Then slowly he nodded. Elijah stood. "Good. Now let's get some food in you." He heated the stew-sliced bread, poured water into tin cups. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in weeks, and maybe they hadn't. Ayanna ate slower, more deliberate, but she ate. That was something. When they finished, Elijah handed the oldest boy a rag. "Help me clean up." The boy looked at Ayanna. She nodded. He took the rag. They worked in silence, clearing bowls, wiping the table. The boy moved carefully, like he was waiting for Elijah to change his mind. When they finished, Elijah handed him the small wooden horse. "Here, you can have it." The boy took it, turned it over in his hands, and looked up at Elijah with something close to wonder. "It's yours," Elijah said. "You don't have to give it back." The boy clutched it to his chest and went back to his mother. Ayanna watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. "You're kind to them. They're kids. They deserve kindness. Most men wouldn't think so. Most men are idiots." She almost smiled. Almost. Then the sound of hooves cut through the morning air. Elijah's head snapped toward the window. Ayanna went rigid. The children pressed closer to her, eyes wide. "Stay here," Elijah said. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside. 3 horses stood in the snow. 3 men. The one in the middle was Sheriff Wade Tucker, a man Elijah had known since before the war. To his left was Deputy Collins, young and nervous. To his right was someone Elijah didn't recognize, tall, clean-shaven, wearing a tailored coat that cost more than most men made in a year. Sheriff Tucker tipped his hat. "Morning, Eli." "Wade, we heard you had company." Elijah didn't move. "You heard right." The man in the expensive coat leaned forward in his saddle. "I'm Colonel Nathan Cordell. I own the land west of here." "I know who you are." Cordell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then you know I don't tolerate squatters." "They're not squatters. They're my guests." "Your guests." Cordell's tone turned sharp. "You're harboring 5 Indian children and a woman who has no business being here." "She has every business being here. I invited her." "You invited?" Cordell laughed, cold and mirthless. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Those people were removed for a reason." "What reason's that?" "They're dangerous." Elijah looked at the sheriff. "Wade, you believe that?" Tucker shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable. "Eli, I don't make the rules." "But you enforce them." "I have to." Cordell cut in. "The law is clear, Mr. Thornton. Indians are not permitted to settle on this land without authorization. If you're sheltering them, you're breaking the law." "Then I'm breaking the law." Cordell's jaw tightened. "I could have you arrested." "You could try." The 2 men stared at each other. The deputy's hand drifted toward his holster. Elijah didn't flinch. Finally, Cordell straightened. "I'll give you until sundown. Get them off your property, or I'll come back with a warrant and more men." He tugged his reins and turned his horse. The deputy followed. Sheriff Tucker lingered a moment longer. "Eli," he said quietly, "don't do this. It's not worth it." "Yeah, it is." Tucker sighed, shook his head, and rode off. Elijah stood in the snow until the sound of hooves faded. Then he turned and went back inside. Ayanna was standing now, the baby on her hip, the other children gathered around her. Her face was pale. "We need to leave," she said. "No." "Elijah." "I said no." He closed the door behind him. "You're staying, all of you." "They'll come back." "I know." "They'll bring more men." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I already lost one family." His voice cracked just a little. "I'm not losing another." Ayanna stared at him. The baby fussed. The children were silent. Then the oldest boy stepped forward. He looked up at Elijah, his small hand clutching the wooden horse, and said in halting English, "Thank you." Elijah's throat tightened. He nodded once. "You're welcome." And that was when he knew there was no going back now. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. Ayanna tried to busy herself sweeping the floor, folding blankets, anything to keep her hands moving. The children stayed close to her, quiet as shadows. Elijah worked outside, chopping wood with more force than necessary, the axe biting deep into frozen logs. Each swing was a way to think. Each crack of wood was a question he couldn't answer. What the hell was he doing? He didn't know these people, didn't owe them anything. And yet here he was, risking everything. His land, his life, maybe even his soul. For a woman and 5 children, he'd found half dead in the snow. Sarah would have understood. She'd always had a soft heart, always took in strays, injured birds, lost dogs, even a half-starved drifter once who'd repaid them by fixing their roof. She'd believed people were good, deep down. Elijah had never been that optimistic. But he'd loved her for it. He buried the axe in a stump and wiped his brow. The sun was high now, glinting off the snow like shards of glass. Beautiful and brutal, same as everything else in this place. When he went back inside, Ayanna was kneeling by the hearth, teaching the children something with sticks and stones. They listened intently, nodding, repeating words he didn't understand. It was the first time he'd seen them look like children. "What are you teaching them?" he asked. She glanced up. A game. From my grandmother. They seem to like it. They need something normal. Elijah nodded. Normal. He barely remembered what that felt like. The youngest girl, the one with the pale lashes, toddled over to him clutching a stick. She held it up, babbling something. Elijah crouched down. That for me. She nodded, serious as a judge. He took the stick. Thank you. She giggled and ran back to Ayanna, who was watching with something that might have been surprise. She doesn't trust easy, Ayanna said. Smart kid. But she trusts you. Elijah turned the stick over in his hands. I don't know why. Because you don't lie. Ayanna stood brushing off her skirt. You say what you mean. Children can tell. He didn't know what to say to that, so he set the stick on the table beside the wooden horse. Elijah, Ayanna said, her voice low. What will you do when they come back? I don't know yet. You need a plan. I know. You can't fight them all. I know that too. She crossed her arms. Then what? He looked at her, really looked at her. She was stronger than she seemed he could tell, the kind of strength that came from surviving things that should have killed you, the kind Sarah had near the end. I'll figure something out, he said. That's not a plan. It's all I've got. Before she could argue, the door opened. Elijah spun, hand going to the knife on his belt. But it was just Reverend Samuel Hart, his thin face red from the cold, his Bible tucked under one arm. Reverend, Elijah said, relaxing slightly, didn't expect to see you. I heard what happened. Hart stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. He glanced at Ayanna and the children, and his expression softened. Thought you might need a friend. I need a miracle. Hart smiled faintly. Those are in short supply these days. He turned to Ayanna. Ma'am. She nodded, wary. I'm Samuel Hart. I run the church in town. He looked at the children. Are they all right? They're alive, Ayanna said carefully. That's more than I expected. Hart's face darkened. I heard about Cordell. He's a hard man. He's a cruel man, Elijah corrected. That too. Hart set his Bible on the table. But he's also powerful. He owns half the land around here, and he's got the ear of every man who matters. If he wants you gone, Eli, he'll find a way. Then I'll make it hard for him. You can't win this fight. Maybe not, but I can make him bleed. Hart sighed. That's not going to help anyone. It'll help me sleep at night. Ayanna spoke up. Why are you here, Reverend? Hart looked at her. Because what Cordell's doing is wrong, and because I thought maybe... He hesitated. Maybe if there was a way to make this legal, he'd back off. Elijah frowned. What are you talking about? If she were your wife, Hart said carefully, then she'd have the protection of your name. So would the children. The room went silent. Ayanna's face went blank. No. I'm not saying you have to, Hart began. No. She repeated sharper this time. I won't be traded like livestock. That's not what I'm suggesting. Isn't it? She stood trembling with anger. I've been sold before, Reverend. I've been traded. I've been owned. I won't do it again. Elijah stepped forward. Ayanna, don't. She turned on him. Don't you dare ask me to do this. I'm not asking. Then what are you doing? He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. I'm telling you that if it keeps you and those kids alive, I'll stand in front of a preacher and say whatever words need saying, but it doesn't mean anything unless you want it to. She stared at him, chest heaving. The children watched wide-eyed and silent. It's just words, Elijah said quietly. That's all. Just words to keep Cordell off your back. And what do you get out of it? She demanded. Nothing. Liar? I'm not lying. Then you're a fool. Already established that. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Hart cleared his throat. I don't need an answer now. Think about it. Both of you. He picked up his Bible. But if you decide to do it, come find me. I'll make it official. He left as quietly as he'd come. Ayanna sank back down by the fire, her hands shaking. The oldest boy came to her side, whispered something. She nodded, touched his cheek. Elijah stood by the window, staring out at the snow. Marriage. He'd never thought he'd hear that word again. Never thought he'd stand beside anyone but Sarah. And this wasn't real. It was survival. Strategy. A way to keep the wolves at bay. But Sarah was gone. Had been for 3 years. And if a piece of paper could save the lives of 6 people, wasn't it worth it? He looked at Ayanna. She was watching him now, something unreadable in her eyes. I'm not asking you to love me, he said. Hell, I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm just asking you to let me help. She was quiet for a long time. Then so quietly he almost missed it. Why do you care? Because someone should. That's not an answer. Elijah turned away from the window. When Sarah died, I prayed. I begged God to take me instead. Let me trade places. But he didn't, and I've spent 3 years trying to figure out why I'm still here. He looked at the children, then back at her. Maybe this is why. Ayanna's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She just nodded once slowly. If I say yes, she said, it's not because I trust you. It's because I have no other choice. I know. And it doesn't mean we're anything. I know that too. She stood, walked over to him, and held out her hand. Then let's make a deal, Elijah Thornton. You keep us safe, and I'll stand beside you when they come. He took her hand. Her grip was strong, calloused, warm. Deal, he said. And somewhere outside, the wind began to pick up again. They went to the church 3 hours later, when the sun hung low and cold over the ridge. Elijah didn't ask if Ayanna had changed her mind. She'd made her decision, and he respected that. The children walked between them, quiet and confused. The oldest boy, Ayanna, had finally told him his name was Dakota, kept glancing up at Elijah like he was trying to figure out a puzzle with missing pieces. Reverend Hart was waiting inside, standing near the pulpit, with his hands clasped. The church was empty except for him. Cold, too. No fire in the stove. Hart believed suffering brought you closer to God. Elijah had never agreed with that, but he'd stopped arguing about it years ago. You came, Hart said. We came, Elijah replied. Hart looked at Ayanna. Are you certain about this, ma'am? No, she said flatly, but I'm doing it anyway. Hart nodded slowly. That's honest, at least. He gestured toward the altar. Come forward, then. They walked up together, side by side, but not touching. The children stayed in the front pew, watching with wide eyes. Dakota held the baby. The others pressed close to him. Hart opened his Bible, flipped through pages worn thin from use, and stopped. We'll keep this simple. No vows, no rings, just the legal part. That's what you need, correct? That's what we need, Elijah confirmed. Hart began to read, his voice echoing in the empty space. Words about union and covenant and protection. Elijah barely heard them. He was watching Ayanna from the corner of his eye. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were fists at her sides. She looked like a woman walking toward her own execution. When Hart asked if Elijah took Ayanna as his lawful wife, he said, I do. When Hart asked Ayanna the same question, she hesitated. Just for a second. Then, I do. The words tasted like ash. By the authority granted to me by the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you man and wife. Hart closed his Bible. May God have mercy on both of you. Elijah turned to Ayanna. That's it. That's it, she repeated. They didn't kiss, didn't touch. Just stood there in the cold church while Hart scribbled their names in a ledger. When he finished, he tore out a page and handed it to Elijah. Keep this safe. It's the only proof you have. Elijah folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. Thank you, Samuel. Don't thank me yet. Hart glanced toward the door. Cordell's not going to like this. Cordell can go to hell. He might take you with him. Elijah didn't answer. He turned to Ayanna. Let's go home. She looked at him and something flickered in her eyes. Not gratitude, not affection, just acknowledgement. Yes, let's go. They walked out into the fading light. The children followed silent as ghosts. When they reached the cabin, Elijah held the door open. Ayanna stepped inside first, then the children. He followed last, shutting out the cold. Inside, the fire had burned low again. Elijah added wood, stirred the coals, and the flames jumped back to life. Ayanna sat on the floor near the hearth, pulling the baby into her lap. The other children gathered around her. Are we safe now? Dakota asked in English. Ayanna looked at Elijah. He crouched down in front of the boy. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe, Elijah said. That's a promise. Promises break. Not mine. Dakota stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Elijah stood and moved to the stove. He heated leftover stew, sliced more bread, poured water. They ate in silence, the only sounds, the crackling fire, and the scrape of spoons against tin bowls. When they finished, the children began to droop, exhaustion finally catching up to them. Ayanna laid them down near the hearth, covering them with every blanket Elijah owned. She hummed that same low melody from the night before, and one by one they drifted off. When she was done, she stood and walked to the window. Elijah joined her. They'll come tomorrow, she said. I know. What will you tell them? The truth. That you're my wife now. That the children are under my protection. She glanced at him. You think that'll be enough? No, but it's a start. She turned back to the window. I never wanted to marry again. I know. My first husband. She stopped, swallowed. He was not kind. Elijah's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's dead now. How? Settlers accused him of stealing cattle. They hanged him from a tree while I watched. Her voice was flat empty. They made me watch. Elijah closed his eyes. Jesus. There is no Jesus for my people, only suffering. That's not true. Isn't it? She faced him now, and there was fire in her eyes. Tell me, Elijah, when was the last time your God showed mercy to someone like me? He didn't have an answer. She turned away. That's what I thought. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Elijah spoke. I can't change what happened to you. I can't undo it. But I can stand between you and anyone who tries to hurt you again. Why? She demanded. Why do you care so much? Because I couldn't save my family. The words came out raw, unfiltered. I couldn't save Sarah. I couldn't save my boys. I had to watch them die, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. So maybe, he stopped, breathed. Maybe if I can save you, it'll mean something. Ayanna stared at him. Then slowly she reached out and touched his arm. Just once. Just for a moment. You're a strange man, Elijah Thornton. I've been told. But not a bad one. High praise. She almost smiled. Almost. Then the sound of horses shattered the night. Elijah's head snapped toward the door. Ayanna went rigid. The children stirred but didn't wake. Stay inside, Elijah said. He grabbed his rifle from above the mantel and stepped out onto the porch. 5 riders this time. Cordell in the lead, Sheriff Tucker beside him, and 3 men Elijah didn't recognize. Hard men with guns and mean faces. The kind who did dirty work for money. Cordell dismounted slowly, deliberately. Mr. Thornton, we need to talk. Nothing to talk about. Oh, I think there is. Cordell smiled cold and sharp. I heard you got married today. Congratulations. Thank you. Married an Indian woman, no less. That's progressive of you. Elijah didn't rise to the bait. She's my wife. That's all that matters. Is it? Cordell stepped closer. Because I've been thinking. A man like you taking in a woman and 5 children overnight seems suspicious, don't you think? There's nothing suspicious about doing the right thing. The right thing? Cordell laughed. The right thing would have been turning them over to the authorities. I am the authority on my land. Your land. Cordell's smile vanished. Let me tell you something about your land, Thornton. You're one bad harvest away from losing it, one missed payment, one mistake, and when that happens, I'll be there to buy it. Cheap. You threatening me? I'm stating facts. Sheriff Tucker cleared his throat. Eli Cordell's within his rights to... Shut up, Wade. Elijah didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Cordell. You want my land. Come take it. Cordell's jaw tightened. Careful, Thornton. Men have died for less. I've killed men for less. The air went electric. One of Cordell's men shifted his hand toward his gun. Elijah raised his rifle an inch. Just an inch. But it was enough. Stand down, Cordell snapped at his man. Then to Elijah. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. Cordell stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned, climbed back onto his horse, and looked down at Elijah with something close to pity. You'll regret this. I regret a lot of things. This won't be one of them. Cordell spurred his horse and rode off. The others followed. Tucker lingered, shaking his head. You're a damn fool, Eli. So I've been told. Tucker rode away. Elijah stood on the porch until the sound of hooves faded into nothing. Then he went back inside. Ayanna was standing in the middle of the room, a knife in her hand. The children were awake now, huddled behind her. They're gone, Elijah said. She didn't lower the knife. For now. For now, he agreed. She finally set the knife down. What did he say? Same thing everyone says, that I'm making a mistake. Maybe you are. Maybe. He set the rifle down. But it's my mistake to make. The children slowly relaxed. Dakota stood, walked over to Elijah and tugged on his sleeve. Are you going to protect us? The boy asked. Elijah knelt down. Yes. Even if they come back. Even then. Dakota studied him, then nodded. Good. The boy went back to his mother. Ayanna pulled him close, kissed the top of his head, and whispered something Elijah didn't catch. The night settled into an uneasy quiet. Elijah sat by the window rifle across his lap, watching the darkness. Ayanna stayed near the children, awake and alert. Neither of them slept. When dawn finally came, pale and cold, Elijah stood and stretched. His back ached. His eyes burned. But he was alive, and so were they. Ayanna rose and began preparing breakfast. The children woke slowly, rubbing their eyes, still half dreaming. Dakota helped his mother. The youngest girl, Mika Ayanna, had told him, toddled over to Elijah and climbed into his lap without asking. He froze, unsure what to do. She settled against his chest, small and warm, and closed her eyes. After a moment, he wrapped an arm around her. Ayanna glanced over and saw them. Something softened in her face. She likes you, Ayanna said. She doesn't know me. Children know more than adults give them credit for. Mika's breathing evened out. She was asleep again. Elijah didn't move. Couldn't. He'd forgotten what it felt like to hold a child. Forgotten the weight of trust, the fragility of innocence. Dakota brought him a cup of coffee. Here. Thank you. The boy hesitated. My mother says you're brave. Your mother's wrong. She's never wrong. Elijah smiled despite himself. That's probably true. Dakota sat beside him. The men last night, they'll come back, won't they? Yes. Will you fight them? If I have to. Will you win? Elijah looked at the boy. He wanted to lie, wanted to say yes, of course everything will be fine. But Dakota deserved the truth. "I don't know," Elijah said, "but I'll try." Dakota nodded slowly. "That's enough." After breakfast, Elijah taught Dakota how to chop wood. The boy was small but strong, determined. He swung the axe with surprising force, and when the log split clean down the middle, he grinned, the first real smile Elijah had seen from any of them. "Good," Elijah said. "Again." They worked for an hour, the repetitive motion calming. When they finished, Dakota's hands were blistered, but he didn't complain. He just looked at the pile of wood they'd made and said, "We did that. We did. Together. Together." Elijah agreed. Inside, Ayanna was teaching the girls how to braid rope from dried grass. They worked with quiet focus, their small fingers surprisingly nimble. When Elijah and Dakota came in, the youngest, Nina, held up her finished braid. "Look," she said in English, proud and excited. "That's real good," Elijah told her. She beamed. The day passed in small moments like that. Quiet, simple, almost peaceful. But Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that they were living in the eye of a storm, that any moment the wind would pick up again. He was right. Just after noon, a knock came at the door. Soft, hesitant. Elijah opened it to find a woman standing there, Mary Cordell, Nathan's wife. She was thin, pale, with kind eyes and tired hands. She held a basket covered with a cloth. "Mrs. Cordell," Elijah said, surprised. "Mr. Thornton." She glanced past him, saw Ayanna and the children, and something pained crossed her face. "I brought food. Bread mostly. Some preserves." Elijah took the basket. "That's kind of you." "It's the least I can do." She lowered her voice. "I'm sorry about my husband. He's not a cruel man, not really. He just wants what he wants," Elijah finished. "Yes." She looked at Ayanna. "I wanted you to know that not everyone in town feels the way he does." Ayanna stepped forward. "Why are you here, Mrs. Cordell?" "Because I know what it's like to be powerless." Mary's voice shook. "And because I have children of my own. If someone had helped them when they needed it, I'd want to thank them." Ayanna studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Thank you." Mary's eyes filled with tears. She turned quickly and hurried back to her wagon. Elijah closed the door. He set the basket on the table and lifted the cloth. Fresh bread still warm, jars of jam, a small sack of sugar. "She's afraid," Ayanna said. "Of what?" "Her husband." Elijah looked at her. "You could tell." "I know fear. I've worn it like a second skin." Ayanna touched one of the jars. "But she came anyway." "That takes courage." "Yes, it does." They ate the bread with the jam, and for a little while the world felt less hostile. But that night, everything changed. Elijah woke to the smell of smoke. He bolted upright, heart-hammering. The cabin was dark except for the glow of the fire in the hearth. But there was another glow too, outside. He ran to the window and saw it. The barn was on fire. "Ayanna!" he shouted. "Get the children up!" She was already moving, scooping up the baby, shaking Dakota awake. Elijah grabbed his rifle and ran outside. The flames roared, consuming the barn in great gulps of orange and red. His horse screamed inside, trapped. Elijah ran toward the doors, but the heat drove him back. He covered his face, tried again. The doors burst open and his horse charged out, mane-singed eyes wild. It bolted into the night. Elijah staggered back, coughing. Then he heard laughter. He spun. 3 men stood at the edge of the woods, silhouettes against the firelight. One of them raised a hand, mocking. Then they vanished into the trees. Cordell's men. Elijah stood there, fists clenched, watching his barn burn. Everything he'd built, everything he'd saved for, gone. Ayanna appeared at his side, breathless. "Are you hurt?" "No." "The barn?" "It's gone." She looked at the flames, then at him. This is because of us. No, this is because of him. Elijah. I don't want to hear it. He turned to her, his face hard. This is what Cordell does. He takes. He breaks. He burns. And I'm done letting him. What are you going to do? I'm going to end this. How? He didn't answer. He just walked back to the cabin, grabbed his coat, and checked his rifle. Ayanna followed. You can't go after him alone. Watch me. You'll die. Maybe. But at least I'll die fighting. She grabbed his arm. And what happens to us when you're dead? What happens to my children? That stopped him. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear she'd been hiding. Not for herself, for them. You can't save us if you're dead, she said quietly. Elijah exhaled slowly. His anger didn't fade, but it cooled, hardened into something colder. You're right, he said. I can't. So what do? He set the rifle down. We survive. We wait. And when the time comes, we make sure he's the one who loses. Ayanna nodded. Together. Together. Outside the barn collapsed in on itself, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky like dying stars. And somewhere in the darkness, Cordell was smiling. But Elijah Thornton wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The ashes were still warm when Reverend Hart arrived at dawn. He stood beside the blackened skeleton of the barn, shaking his head slowly. Elijah was already there, sifting through the wreckage with bare hands, looking for anything salvageable. He found nothing but twisted metal and charred wood. This is my fault, Hart said quietly. Elijah didn't look up. How do you figure? I suggested the marriage. I thought it would protect you. It did. We're still alive. Your barn isn't. Elijah straightened, wiping soot from his hands. Buildings can be rebuilt. Not if Cordell burns them down again. Then I'll rebuild them again. Hart studied him. You're a stubborn man, Elijah Thornton. That's what keeps me breathing. Inside the cabin, Ayanna was teaching the children how to make cornbread. The smell filled the small space warm and ordinary. Dakota stood beside her measuring flour with careful precision. Nina stirred the bowl, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. The baby sat on the floor, banging a wooden spoon against a pot. Hart watched them through the window. They look almost peaceful. They are. For now. And when Cordell comes back, he won't find peace. Elijah turned to face him. I need your help, Samuel. What kind of help? The legal kind. Cordell's acting like he owns this whole territory. Somebody needs to remind him he doesn't. Hart frowned. You want to take him to court? If I have to. Eli, that'll take months, maybe years. And it'll cost money you don't have. Then I'll find it. From where? Elijah didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. Hart sighed. Let me talk to some people. There are folks in town who don't like Cordell any more than you do. Maybe we can put something together. I'd appreciate that. Hart started to leave, then stopped. Eli, watch your back. Cordell's done playing games. I know. After Hart left, Elijah went inside. The children looked up at him with flour-dusted faces. Ayanna wiped her hands on a cloth. The Reverend wants to help, she asked. Says he'll try. Do you believe him? I want to. She nodded slowly. Want and believe are different things. I know that too. Dakota spoke up. What happens if the bad man comes back? Elijah crouched down. Then we deal with it. How? Together, like we said. The boy considered this, then went back to helping his mother. But Elijah saw the worry in his eyes, saw it in all their eyes. They'd learned young that safety was temporary, that peace was a lie adults told to make the darkness less frightening. He wished he could prove them wrong. That afternoon, Sheriff Tucker showed up alone. No horse, no badge visible, Just a man walking up the road with his hands in his pockets. Elijah met him at the property line. "Wade?" "Eli." Tucker looked at the burned barn. "I'm sorry about that." "Are you?" "I didn't know he was going to do it." "Would you have stopped him if you did?" Tucker's silence was answer enough. Elijah shook his head. "What do you want, Wade?" "To give you a warning. Cordell's talking about getting you arrested." "On what charge?" "Harboring fugitives." "They're not fugitives. They're my family." "He's saying they escaped from a reservation." "What reservation?" "There isn't one within 100 miles. Tucker shrugged. "Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if people believe it." Elijah's jaw tightened. "You going to arrest me?" "Not if I can help it. But Cordell's got influence, Eli. He can bring in a federal marshal if he wants." "Let him try." "You're not hearing me. A federal marshal won't care about your marriage certificate. He'll just take them." "Over my dead body." Tucker stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That's exactly what Cordell's counting on. He wants you to fight, wants you to give him a reason to put you in the ground." "Then what do you suggest I do? Just hand them over?" "No. I'm saying be smart. Don't give him ammunition." "He burned my barn, Wade. How much more ammunition does he need?" Tucker had no answer for that. He looked tired, defeated. "Just watch yourself, please." He walked away, and Elijah stood there watching him go. When he turned back toward the cabin, Ayanna was standing in the doorway. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough." She crossed her arms. "He's right. They'll come for us." "Not while I'm alive." "That's what I'm afraid of." Elijah walked past her into the cabin. The children were playing with the wooden horse and some carved figures Elijah had made over the years. Simple things. A cow. A dog. A bird. They'd created a whole world on the floor. "They're happy," Ayanna said behind him. "For now." "Elijah, maybe we should—" "Don't." He turned to face her. "Don't say we should leave. Don't say it's not worth it, because it is." "How can you be sure?" "Because I buried my family without fighting for them. I watched them die, and I did nothing." His voice cracked. "I won't do that again." Ayanna's expression softened. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "You're going to get hurt," she said quietly. "Probably. You're going to lose things. Already have. And you're still willing to fight?" "Yes." She searched his face for a long moment. Then she reached up and touched his cheek just once, just briefly. Her hand was warm. "Then we fight together." That night, Elijah couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the darkness, waiting for movement that never came. Around 2 in the morning, Dakota appeared beside him. "Can't sleep either?" Elijah asked. The boy shook his head. "I keep thinking about the fire. It's over now. But it'll happen again. Won't it?" Elijah wanted to lie, wanted to tell him no, everything will be fine, you're safe. But he'd promised himself no more lies. "Maybe," he said, "but we'll be ready." "How do you get ready for fire?" "You build with stone instead of wood. You keep water close. You stay awake." Dakota looked up at him. "Is that what you're doing?" "Staying awake." "Someone has to." The boy was quiet for a moment. Then, "My father used to stay awake too. He said the night was when bad men came." "Your father was right." "He died anyway." Elijah's chest tightened. "I know. I don't want you to die. I'm going to do my best not to." Dakota nodded, then climbed into the chair beside Elijah's. He pulled his knees to his chest and stared out at the darkness. After a while, his breathing evened out. He'd fallen asleep sitting up. Elijah reached over and adjusted the boy's position so he wouldn't wake with a stiff neck. Dakota mumbled something but didn't wake. From across the room, Ayanna watched them. She didn't say anything, just watched. And something in her expression looked almost like hope. 3 days passed without incident. 3 days of tense peace. Elijah spent them reinforcing the cabin, boarding up weak spots, making sure every shutter could be barred from the inside. Dakota helped, handing him nails, holding boards steady. The boy was learning fast. Learning carpentry, learning English, learning to trust. On the 4th day, Mary Cordell came back. This time, she didn't bring food. She brought a warning. "My husband's meeting with the territorial governor tomorrow," she said, her voice urgent. "He's asking for military assistance." Elijah's blood went cold. "Military? He's claiming there's an Indian uprising, that you're harboring hostiles. That's insane." "I know, but he's convincing." Mary glanced over her shoulder, nervous. "You need to leave, Mr. Thornton. Take them and go. Tonight." "Where would we go?" "Anywhere. Canada, maybe. Somewhere he can't reach you." "I'm not running." "Then you're a fool." Her voice broke. "Please, I've seen what he does to people who stand against him. He'll destroy you." "He can try." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying to save your life. And I appreciate that. But some things are worth dying for." She stared at him, then shook her head. "I hope you know what you're doing." She left before he could respond. Inside, Ayanna had heard everything. "Military," she repeated. "He's bringing soldiers." "Not if I can stop him." "How?" "I'll ride to the capital, talk to the governor myself." "That's 2 days away. You won't make it in time." "Then I'll ride fast." "Elijah, I'm going." He grabbed his coat, his rifle. "Keep the doors locked. Don't open them for anyone but me or Hart. What if you don't come back?" He stopped at the door, looked back at her, at the children gathered behind her, watching with frightened eyes. "I'll come back. Promise." He'd never been good at promises. They always seemed to break. But he looked at those children, at Dakota, standing tall, at Nina, clutching her mother's skirt, at little Mika, with her wide, trusting eyes, and he knew he had to try. "I promise." Then he was gone out into the cold, saddling his horse with shaking hands. The animal was still skittish from the fire, but it knew him, trusted him. He swung up into the saddle and kicked it into a gallop. The ride to the capital was brutal. The trail was half-frozen, treacherous. Twice his horse nearly threw him. Once he had to dismount and lead it across a narrow bridge that looked ready to collapse. But he kept moving. He reached the capital by nightfall the next day. The governor's mansion loomed ahead, lit from within. Elijah tied his horse, walked up to the front door and knocked. A butler answered, looked him up and down with barely concealed disgust. "Tradesmen use the back entrance." "I'm not a tradesman. I need to see the governor." "The governor doesn't see anyone without an appointment." "Then I'll wait." "You'll leave or I'll have you removed." Elijah pushed past him into the foyer. "I'm not leaving until I talk to him." The butler sputtered. "Security!" 2 men appeared, large and armed. Elijah raised his hands. "I just need 5 minutes, please." "Out. Now." They grabbed his arms. Elijah didn't resist. What was the point? They dragged him back outside, threw him down the steps. He landed hard, pain shooting up his shoulder. "Don't come back," one of them warned. Elijah sat there in the dirt, watching the mansion door close. He'd failed. Cordell would get his military support, and there was nothing Elijah could do about it. Unless... He stood, dusted himself off, and walked around to the back of the mansion. If he couldn't talk to the governor, maybe he could talk to someone who could. He found a young maid emptying washwater near the kitchen. She looked startled when she saw him. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quickly. "I just need help." "You're the man they threw out." "Yes." "You should leave." "I will. But first, do you know the governor?" "I work for him." "Does he listen to you?" She laughed bitterly. "Men like him don't listen to women like me." "But you see him. You're in the house." "So?" Elijah pulled out the marriage certificate, now worn and creased. "I need him to see this, to know that Colonel Cordell is lying about me." The maid looked at the paper, then at him. Why should I help you? Because you know what it's like to be powerless. I can see it in your eyes. He swallowed. And because if I don't get through to the governor, 6 people are going to die. 5 of them children. Her expression wavered. I could lose my position. I know. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she took the certificate. Wait here. She disappeared into the house. Elijah stood in the shadows, heart pounding. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the door opened again. But it wasn't the maid. It was the governor himself, the marriage certificate in his hand. He was younger than Elijah expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a harder expression. You're Thornton. Yes, sir. Cordell says you're harboring fugitives. Cordell's a liar. That's a strong accusation. It's the truth. The woman I married and her children aren't fugitives. They're innocent people he's trying to run off their land. Their land, I thought it was your land. It is now. We're married. Legal and binding. He gestured to the certificate. That's proof. The governor examined it. Reverend Hart's signature. He's reputable. He looked up. But marriage doesn't change the fact that they're Apache. Does being Apache make them criminals? It makes them vulnerable to territorial law. Which says what? That they don't deserve protection. The governor's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. I will not. Elijah stepped forward. I serve this country. I fought for it. I watched good men die for it. And now you're telling me that my wife and her children don't deserve the same rights I fought for. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? The governor was silent. He looked at the certificate again, then at Elijah. Something shifted in his expression. Cordell told me you were a troublemaker. I'm not. I'm just a man trying to protect his family. He also told me you were dangerous. Only to people who try to hurt what's mine. The governor handed back the certificate. I'm not giving Cordell military support. Elijah's knees nearly buckled with relief. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm not stopping him either. What he does on his own land is his business. He burned my barn. Can you prove it? I know it was him. Knowing and proving are different things, Mr. Thornton. The governor turned to go back inside. My advice? Get a lawyer. File charges. Do it the right way. And if he kills us before I can... The governor paused. Then I'll make sure he hangs for it. The door closed. Elijah stood there, rage and relief warring in his chest. He'd stopped the military, but he hadn't stopped Cordell. He rode back through the night, pushing his horse harder than he should have. When he finally saw his cabin in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney, he felt something loosen in his chest. He was home. But as he got closer, he saw them. 3 horses tied near his fence. 3 men standing on his porch. Cordell's men. Elijah kicked his horse into a full gallop. He jumped down before the animal even stopped, rifle in hand. Get off my property. The men turned. One of them smiled. We're just visiting. I said get off. Or what, you'll shoot us. If I have to. The front door opened. Ayanna stepped out, Dakota beside her. Both of them looked terrified. They've been here 2 hours, Ayanna said. Waiting for you. Elijah's finger tightened on the trigger. What do you want? To deliver a message. The man held up a piece of paper. From Colonel Cordell. He's giving you 3 days to vacate the property. After that, he's taking it. By force if necessary. This is my land. Not anymore. Cordell bought your loan from the bank. You're 3 months behind on payments. That means he owns you now. Elijah's world tilted. That's not legal. Take it up with a judge. The man dropped the paper on the porch. 3 days, Thornton. Then you're trespassing. They mounted their horses and rode off laughing. Elijah stood frozen. Everything he'd built, everything he'd fought for, gone. Just like that. Ayanna picked up the paper, read it, and her face went pale. Is this real? I don't know. Elijah. I need to think. He walked past her into the cabin, his mind racing. The children watched him with wide eyes. He wanted to tell them it would be okay, wanted to promise them safety. But the promises were running out. Dakota approached slowly. Are we leaving? Elijah looked at him. At all of them. And something inside him hardened into steel. No, he said. We're not leaving. This is our home. And I'll be damned if I let Cordell take it. But the paper says... I don't care what the paper says. He knelt down, looked Dakota in the eye. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when the law says you're wrong. Do you understand? The boy nodded slowly. Elijah stood. Ayanna, get the children ready. We're going to town. Why? Because if Cordell wants a fight, I'm going to give him one, but I'm going to do it where everyone can see. She understood. The church. The church. Within an hour, they were loaded into Elijah's wagon heading toward town. The children huddled together in the back, silent and scared. Ayanna sat beside Elijah, her face set in grim determination. When they reached the church, Reverend Hart was sweeping the steps. He looked up surprised. Eli, what's going on? I need sanctuary. Hart's eyes widened. What? Cordell's coming for us. I need you to protect us, please. Hart looked at Ayanna, at the children, then back at Elijah. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he nodded. Come inside. They filed into the church. Hart locked the doors behind them. How long do you need? Hart asked. As long as it takes. For what? Elijah pulled out the marriage certificate, the governor's rejection, the loan papers. To make people see the truth. And as the sun set over Thornton's Ridge, the battle lines were finally drawn. Word spread through town faster than fire. By nightfall, half the settlement knew that Elijah Thornton had taken sanctuary in the church with an Apache woman and 5 children. The other half would know by morning. Hart lit candles along the pews while the children explored the small space with cautious wonder. Nina ran her fingers along the smooth wood of the benches. Dakota stood by the altar staring up at the cross with an expression Elijah couldn't read. The baby slept in Ayanna's arms, oblivious to the storm gathering outside. How long can we stay? Ayanna asked Hart. As long as you need to. He set down another candle. Sanctuary is sacred. Even Cordell won't violate that. You sure about that? Elijah asked. Hart met his gaze. No. But I'm betting on it anyway. Elijah walked to the front door, tested the lock. Solid oak, thick as his forearm. The windows were high and narrow, too small for a man to climb through. The church had been built to last, to withstand. Maybe it could withstand this too. Behind him, Ayanna began singing softly to the children. The same melody she'd hummed that first night. Low and mournful and ancient. The sound filled the empty church, like water filling a well. Hart sat in the front pew, his Bible open but unread. What's your plan, Eli? Make people listen. To what? The truth. The truth doesn't always win. Then I'll make it loud enough that it has to. Hart sighed. You're asking people to choose sides. That's dangerous. They already chose. They just didn't know it yet. And if they choose wrong? Elijah looked at Ayanna, at the children gathered around her. Then I'll live with it. But at least I'll know I tried. The first knock came an hour later. Soft. Hesitant. Elijah drew his rifle. Hart raised a hand. Let me. He opened the door a crack. Mary Cordell stood there wrapped in a shawl, her face pale in the moonlight. Mrs. Cordell, Hart said, it's late. I know, I had to come. She looked past him, saw Elijah. I need to speak with you. Elijah stepped forward. Your husband send you? No. He doesn't know I'm here. She glanced over her shoulder. Please, just a moment. Hart let her in. She stood just inside the doorway, clutching her shawl like armor. "I heard what he did," she said quietly. "The loan. He bought it 3 weeks ago. Been planning this." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "Because I was afraid." Her voice broke. "I'm still afraid, but I can't watch him destroy another family." "Another family?" Mary's eyes filled with tears. "There was a man before you. A farmer. Nathan wanted his land too. The man refused to sell. So Nathan bought his debts, forced him out. The man tried to fight back." She paused. "They found him hanging from a tree a week later." The church went silent. Even the children stopped moving. "They said it was suicide," Mary continued. "But I know better. Nathan had him killed." Elijah felt ice in his veins. "You have proof?" "No, just a wife's intuition and a guilty conscience." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to know what you're up against." She looked at Ayanna, at the children. "And because they deserve to know the truth." Ayanna stepped forward. "Will you testify?" "Against my own husband?" Mary laughed bitterly. "They'd never believe me. I'm just a woman. Worse, I'm his woman." "They'd believe you if others came forward too," Hart said. "What others?" "The people who've seen what Cordell does. The ones who've been too afraid to speak." Mary shook her head. "You don't understand. Nathan owns this town. The bank, the land office, half the businesses. Cross him and you lose everything." "Then maybe it's time people decided that everything isn't worth keeping if it costs their souls," Elijah said. Mary stared at him. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded document. "This is a copy of the loan transfer. I took it from Nathan's desk." She handed it to Elijah. "There's something wrong with it. I don't know what, but the dates don't match up." Elijah unfolded it, scanned the text. His eyes stopped on a single line. "This is dated 2 weeks before I missed a payment." "What does that mean?" Ayanna asked. "It means he planned this before I had any reason to default. He set me up." Elijah looked at Mary. "This is fraud. Can you prove it?" "With this, maybe." He folded the document carefully. "Thank you." Mary moved toward the door. "I have to go. If he realizes I'm gone—" "Wait." Ayanna crossed the room, stopped in front of her. "Why risk this for us?" "Because I have daughters. And if someone doesn't stand up to men like Nathan, what kind of world will they inherit?" She touched Ayanna's arm just once. "I hope you survive this. I really do." Then she was gone, slipping back into the darkness. Hart locked the door behind her. "That changes things." "Does it?" Elijah asked. "If you can prove fraud, the loan's invalid. Cordell has no claim." "Big if. But possible." Elijah looked at the document again. "I need to get this to a judge. The nearest circuit judge won't be here for 2 weeks. Then I'll ride to him." "Eli, you can't leave them here alone." "I know." He turned to Ayanna. "Can you shoot?" She nodded. "My father taught me." He handed her a revolver from his coat. 6 shots. Make them count." She took the gun, checked the chamber with practiced ease. "I will." Dakota appeared at her side. "I can help too." Elijah knelt down. "I know you can. But right now the best way to help is to take care of your sisters. Can you do that?" The boy's face fell, but he nodded. "Yes. That's not a small thing, Dakota. That's everything." The boy straightened a little. "I won't let you down. I know you won't." Elijah stood, turned to Hart. "Keep them safe, whatever it takes. You have my word. And if Cordell comes, then God help him." Elijah almost smiled. He grabbed his rifle, checked his ammunition, and headed for the door. Ayanna caught his arm. "You promised you'd come back." "I will." "Elijah." I will. He covered her hand with his. I promise. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she let go. He stepped out into the night. The cold bit at his face. His horse was still tied near the church, stamping nervously. He mounted up, kicked it into motion, and rode toward the mountains where the judge was said to be hearing cases. Behind him in the church, Ayanna locked the door and pulled the children close. The ride took Elijah 3 days. The judge was in a mining camp 2 valleys over settling claim disputes. Elijah found him in a tent that served as a makeshift courtroom, presiding over 2 miners arguing about a vein of silver. When there was a break, Elijah approached. Your Honor, I need a moment. The judge looked up irritated. He was old-weathered with eyes that had seen too much. Court's in session. File a complaint and wait your turn. I can't wait. This is urgent. Everything's urgent out here, son. What makes yours special? Elijah slapped the loan document on the table. Fraud and attempted murder. That got the judge's attention. He picked up the document, read it slowly. His expression darkened. Nathan Cordell, he muttered. Should have known. You know him? Everyone knows him. Man's got a reputation. The judge looked up. You got proof beyond this paper. I've got a witness, his wife. She willing to testify? I think so, if you protect her. The judge leaned back. That's a big ask. Cordell's got friends in high places. Then maybe it's time those friends knew what kind of man they're protecting. The judge studied him. What's your stake in this? My family, my land, my life. That woman he mentions in his claim, she Apache, she's my wife. That true or just convenient? Elijah's hand curled into a fist. It's true. The judge held his gaze, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll issue a temporary injunction. Cordell can't touch your land until we sort this out. He scribbled something on a piece of paper. But you better pray your witness shows up. Without her, this paper's just ink. She'll show. You seem mighty sure. I have to be. The judge handed him the injunction. Get back to your family, son, and watch your back. Elijah took the paper, folded it carefully, and rode back faster than he'd come. His horse was exhausted by the time he reached town, foam flecking its mouth. But he didn't slow down until he saw the church, and the crowd gathered outside it. 20 people, maybe more. Men and women, some holding torches, some holding tools that could double as weapons. And at the front, Nathan Cordell mounted on a black horse, looking like a king addressing peasants. Elijah's blood ran cold. He dismounted at a run, pushed through the crowd. What the hell is this? He shouted. Cordell turned, smiled. Ah, Thornton, back from your little trip. Get away from that church. I'm not doing anything, just talking to the good people of our town. About what? About safety, about values, about whether we want to be the kind of place that harbors criminals. They're not criminals. That's not what the territorial law says. Elijah pulled out the injunction. And this says, you don't have a legal claim to my land. Fraud Cordell, you set me up. The crowd murmured. Cordell's smile faltered for just a second. Then he recovered. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Truth according to a desperate man. Cordell gestured to the crowd. Think about it, friends. He shows up with an Indian woman and her children, marries her overnight, claims sanctuary. Now he's accusing me of fraud. Does that sound like a rational man? Some people nodded. Others looked uncertain. Elijah raised his voice. I have proof. His own wife testified against him. Mary, Cordell laughed. My wife is ill, mentally unstable. She doesn't know what she's saying. She knew enough to steal this document from your desk. Elijah held it up. The dates don't match. You bought my loan before I missed a payment. You planned this. More murmuring, louder now. Cordell's face darkened. Give me that paper. No. I said give it to me. Make me. Cordell reached for his gun. The crowd gasped, but before he could draw, Sheriff Tucker stepped forward. That's enough, Tucker said, his voice tired but firm. Nobody's shooting anybody in front of the church. Cordell glared at him. You work for me, Wade. I work for the law. Same thing. Not anymore. Tucker turned to Elijah. That injunction real? Signed by Judge Morrison. Tucker took it, examined it, and nodded. It's real. Cordell, you're to cease all action against Thornton's property pending a full hearing. This is ridiculous. This is the law. I own this town. You don't own me. Tucker handed the injunction back to Elijah. Go to your family. I'll make sure nobody bothers you tonight. Elijah didn't wait. He pushed through the crowd, ran up the church steps, and pounded on the door. Ayanna, it's me. The door cracked open. Ayanna's face appeared pale, but relieved. She threw it open, and he stumbled inside. The children rushed to him. Nina grabbed his leg. Dakota stood straighter, trying not to cry. Elijah knelt down and pulled them all close. I told you I'd come back, he said. Ayanna touched his face, her hand trembling. I know. I'm sorry. She shook her head. Don't be sorry. Just don't leave again. I won't. Not unless I have to. Hart appeared from the back room. What's happening out there? Tucker's holding the crowd, but it won't last. What do? We wait for the hearing, and we pray Mary Cordell has the courage to testify. Outside, the crowd was dispersing slowly. Cordell hadn't moved. He sat on his horse, staring at the church with cold fury. Tucker approached him. You need to leave, Nathan. This isn't over. Maybe not, but it's over for tonight. Cordell finally turned his horse. But before he rode off, he looked back at the church one last time. 3 days, he called out. That's how long the injunction buys you. After that, we'll see who really owns this town. Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Inside the church, Elijah sat with his back against the wall, the children asleep around him. Ayanna was awake watching the door. Do you think she'll testify? She asked quietly. I don't know. If she doesn't, then we lose everything. Ayanna was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry you're fighting my fight. It's not your fight, it's ours. Is it? He looked at her. You're my wife. Those are my children now. So yes, it's ours. She studied his face in the candlelight. You mean that? I do. Why? Because family isn't just blood. It's who you stand beside when the world tells you to run. Something shifted in her expression, softened. She reached out, took his hand and held it. They sat like that until dawn. Two people who'd been strangers a week ago, now bound together by something stronger than law or paper or even survival. By something that might have been love, though neither of them said it. The hearing was set for noon 3 days later in the town hall. Elijah wore his only clean shirt. Ayanna wore a dress Mary Cordell had sent over, secretly simple but respectable. The children stayed with Hart at the church, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to feel the weight of it. The hall was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. Judge Morrison sat at the front stern and unmoved by the crowd. Cordell entered with his lawyer, a slick man from back east with perfect hair and empty eyes. They took their seats. Cordell didn't look at Elijah, didn't acknowledge him at all. Mary Cordell entered last. She looked small, fragile, terrified. She sat in the back alone. The judge banged his gavel. This hearing is to determine the validity of a loan transfer between Nathan Cordell and Elijah Thornton. Mr. Thornton claims fraud. Mr. Cordell denies it. We'll hear arguments from both sides. Cordell's lawyer stood. He was smooth, confident. He painted Elijah as a desperate man making wild accusations. He showed documents, bank records, witness statements. He made it sound reasonable, logical, legal. When he finished, half the room was nodding. Then it was Elijah's turn. He stood slowly. He wasn't a lawyer, wasn't educated, but he knew how to speak truth. "I'm not a rich man," he began. "Never have been. I work for what I have. I pay my debts, and when I couldn't pay, I thought I'd lose everything fair and square." He held up the loan document. "But this isn't fair. This is fraud. He bought my loan before I defaulted, set me up to fail so he could take my land." "That's conjecture," the lawyer interrupted. "It's fact. The dates prove it. Dates can be misread. Not by Judge Morrison." The judge examined the document again. His frown deepened. Elijah continued, "But it's not just about dates. It's about why. Why would a man like Cordell want my land? It's not the best, not the richest. So why?" He turned to face the crowd. "Because I married an Apache woman. Because I took in her children. Because I refused to throw them out to die." His voice rose. "And that made me a target, made me dangerous, not because I broke the law, but because I showed that decency still exists." The room stirred. People whispered. "Nathan Cordell doesn't want my land," Elijah said. "He wants to send a message, that people like Ayanna don't belong here, that people like me shouldn't help them, that cruelty wins." He looked at the judge. "I'm asking you to prove him wrong." He sat down. The judge turned to Cordell. "Do you have a response?" Cordell stood. He didn't need a lawyer now. "Everything I've done is legal. The loan transfer, the claim, all of it. Mr. Thornton is trying to make this about race, about morality, but this is about business, nothing more." "Then explain the dates," the judge said. "A clerical error." "A convenient one." Cordell's jaw tightened. "I've broken no laws." "That remains to be seen." The judge looked at the back of the room. "Mrs. Cordell, please approach." Mary stood slowly. Every eye turned to her. She walked down the aisle like a woman walking to her execution. Cordell's face went white. "Mary, sit down." She ignored him. "Mary, I said sit down." "No, Nathan." Her voice was quiet but steady. "Not this time." She took the stand. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Cordell, do you have information relevant to this case?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you're willing to testify under oath?" She looked at her husband. He was shaking with rage, but she nodded. "I am." The judge gestured. "Then speak." Mary took a breath. "My husband bought that loan 3 weeks before Mr. Thornton defaulted. I know because I saw the paperwork. He planned it. He wanted that land and he didn't care how he got it." "That's a lie," Cordell shouted. "It's the truth, and it's not the first time." She turned to the crowd. "There was another man, a farmer. Nathan did the same thing to him, forced him off his land. The man died. They said suicide, but I know better." The room erupted, people shouting. Cordell on his feet, face purple with fury. "You ungrateful! That's enough!" The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Mr. Cordell, sit down, now." Cordell sat, but his eyes never left his wife. Mary continued, tears streaming down her face. "I've stayed silent for years. I've let him hurt people because I was afraid. But I can't anymore, not when there are children involved." The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mrs. Cordell. That's very brave." He turned to Cordell. "In light of this testimony and the evidence presented, I'm ruling the loan transfer fraudulent. Mr. Thornton's land remains his. Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into Mr. Cordell's business practices." He banged the gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." The room exploded. Some people cheered. Others shouted protests. Cordell stood shaking with rage and pointed at his wife. "You've destroyed us." No, Nathan, Mary said quietly. You did that yourself. Elijah stood legs weak with relief. Ayanna was beside him suddenly, pulling him into an embrace. He held her tight, feeling her shake with sobs. It's over, he whispered. Is it? He looked at Cordell being escorted out by Sheriff Tucker, still shouting threats. I don't know, Elijah admitted. But we won today. That's enough. They walked back to the church together. The children ran to meet them. Nina laughing, Dakota trying to look grown up, but grinning anyway. Hart met them at the door. I heard. Congratulations. Thank you, Samuel, for everything. Don't thank me. Thank God. I'll thank both. That night, they returned to the cabin. It was damaged, the barn gone, but it was theirs. Elijah built up the fire. Ayanna made stew. The children played with the wooden figures, finally carefree. And for the first time since that night in the snow, the future felt possible. But peace never lasted in places like Thornton's Ridge. Elijah knew that. He'd known it the moment he opened his door to the storm. Some choices changed everything, and there was no going back. 3 nights after the hearing, he woke to Ayanna shaking his shoulder. Her face was pale in the moonlight coming through the window. Someone's outside, she whispered. He was up instantly, reaching for his rifle. The children were still asleep near the hearth. He moved to the window, peered out into the darkness. Nothing. Just shadows and snow. Then he saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the tree line. Not moving, just watching. Stay here, he told Ayanna. Elijah, lock the door behind me. He stepped outside before she could argue. The cold hit him like a fist. He raised the rifle, called out into the darkness. Show yourself. The figure stepped forward into the moonlight. Mary Cordell. Her face was bruised, her lips split and bleeding. She stumbled, caught herself, kept walking. Elijah ran to her. What happened? Nathan. Her voice was barely a whisper. He came home drunk, said I'd destroyed him, that I'd turned everyone against him. Did he do this to you? She nodded, tears streaming. I need help. Please. Elijah caught her as she collapsed. He lifted her, carried her back to the cabin. Ayanna opened the door, gasped when she saw Mary's face. Get water, Elijah said, and cloth. Ayanna moved fast, waking Dakota to help. They laid Mary on Elijah's bed, the only real bed in the cabin. Ayanna began cleaning the wounds while Elijah paced. Where is he now? Elijah asked. I don't know. I ran while he was passed out. Mary winced as Ayanna touched her split lip. I couldn't go anywhere else. Everyone in town, they all work for him. They'd send me back. You're safe here, Ayanna said quietly. I promise. Mary looked at her, really looked at her. You're very kind. After everything he tried to do to you. Kindness costs nothing. Cruelty costs everything. Mary closed her eyes. I should have left him years ago. You testified against him, Elijah said. That took courage most people don't have. It took too long. But you did it. She opened her eyes again. What happens now? Now you rest. In the morning, we figure out the next step. But morning came with more trouble. Sheriff Tucker arrived just after dawn, his face grim. Elijah met him at the door. Wade. Eli, we got a problem. What kind? Cordell's filed charges against his wife. Says she assaulted him, stole money, and ran off. Elijah's jaw dropped. That's insane. Look at her face. I know, but he's got 2 witnesses who'll swear they saw her attack him first. They're lying. Probably, but the territorial marshal's coming to investigate. If she's here, he'll take her. Over my dead body. Tucker sighed. Don't make me arrest you too, Eli. Then don't make me fight you, Wade. They stared at each other. Finally, Tucker looked away. How long until the marshal arrives? Elijah asked. 2 days, maybe 3. That's not enough time. For what? To get her somewhere safe. Tucker shook his head. Where Cordell owns everything within 100 miles, she's got nowhere to go. Then we make somewhere. Inside, Mary was sitting up holding a cup of tea Ayanna had made. The children watched her with worried eyes. When Elijah came back in, she looked up. They're coming for me, aren't they? Not if I can help it. Elijah, you've done enough. I won't let you risk more. You testified for me, for my family. I owe you. You owe me nothing. That's not how I see it. He turned to Ayanna. Can you ride? Yes. Good. Because we're leaving. All of us. Ayanna's eyes widened. Where? Canada. It's a week's ride, maybe less if we push hard. Once we cross the border, Cordell can't touch us. What about the land? Dakota asked. You fought for it. Elijah looked at the boy. Land's just dirt. Your family. Family matters more. Mary stood shaking her head. I can't ask you to give up everything for me. You're not asking. I'm offering. He turned to Ayanna. What do you think? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. We go together. Within an hour, they were packed. Elijah loaded the wagon with food blankets, ammunition. Ayanna dressed the children in layers. Mary helped, despite her injuries, moving slowly but steadily. Hart arrived as they were finishing. He took one look at the wagon and understood. You're running. We're surviving, Elijah corrected. Same thing. Not to me. Hart handed him a leather pouch. Money, from the church collection. It's not much, but it'll help. Samuel, I can't. You can, and you will. Hart gripped his shoulder. You're a good man, Elijah Thornton. Don't let anyone tell you different. Elijah's throat tightened. Thank you for everything. Go with God. They climbed into the wagon. Elijah took the reins. Ayanna sat beside him, the baby in her lap. The other children huddled in the back with Mary. Dakota looked back at the cabin one last time. Will we ever come back? He asked. Maybe, Elijah said. Someday. Do you believe that? Elijah met the boy's eyes. I have to. They rode out just as the sun broke over the mountains. Behind them, the cabin grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared. They made good time the first day. 20 miles, maybe more. The children were quiet, understanding without being told that this wasn't a game. When they stopped for the night, Elijah built a small fire, careful to keep it low. Ayanna sat beside him while the children slept in the wagon. Mary was with them, watching over them like a second mother. Do you regret it? Ayanna asked quietly. Regret what? Opening your door that night. Elijah thought about it, about everything he'd lost, everything he'd risked, everything he'd gained. No, he said finally. Not for a second. Even though we're running. We're not running. We're choosing life over dirt. She leaned against his shoulder. I never thanked you. For what? For seeing us as human. Most don't. Then most are fools. She smiled. You say that a lot. Because it's true a lot. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft. I think I'm starting to love you, Elijah Thornton. His breath caught. He turned to look at her, saw the vulnerability in her eyes. I think I've loved you since you carried my children out of the snow, she added. I just couldn't say it. Why not? Because love is dangerous. It makes you weak. No, he said, taking her hand. It makes you strong. Strong enough to keep going when nothing makes sense. She kissed him then, soft and brief and full of promise. When she pulled back, tears streamed down her face. Don't let them take us, she whispered. I won't. I swear it. But swearing something and doing it were different things. The second day they saw riders in the distance, 6 of them moving fast. Cordell's men. They found us. Mary said, her voice tight with fear. Elijah snapped the reins. Hold on. The wagon lurched forward. The children cried out but held tight. Ayanna braced herself, one arm around the baby, the other gripping the seat. The riders gained on them. Elijah pushed the horses harder, but the wagon was heavy, slowed by supplies and people. They weren't going to outrun them. Elijah! Ayanna shouted. I know! He scanned the terrain. Trees to the left. A ravine to the right. No good options. The riders were close now. Close enough he could hear them shouting. One raised a rifle. Elijah made a choice. He yanked the reins hard left, sent the wagon careening into the trees. Branches scraped the sides. A wheel hit a rock nearly through them, but they made it into the cover of the forest. Everyone out! Elijah jumped down, started unhitching the horses. We go on foot from here. We can't outrun them, Mary said. No, but we can hide. He grabbed supplies, thrust them at Dakota. Carry this. Don't stop moving. Ayanna took the baby, helped the girls down. Mary stumbled, but kept moving. They plunged deeper into the trees, leaving the wagon behind. Behind them, the riders reached the tree line. Elijah could hear them dismounting, shouting orders. They had minutes at best. There! Ayanna pointed to a cluster of rocks ahead, formed into a natural shelter. They scrambled inside just as the first rider passed. Elijah held his rifle ready, finger on the trigger. Beside him, Ayanna had the revolver he'd given her. Her hand was steady. The riders moved through the trees, searching. One passed within 10 feet of their hiding spot. He paused, looked around, then kept going. They waited, silent, barely breathing. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the sound of hooves faded. The riders had moved on deeper into the forest. Are they gone? Nina whispered. For now, Elijah said. But they'll come back. What do we do? Mary asked. We wait until dark, then we move. To where? There's a town about 15 miles north. Small place. Cordell doesn't have reach there. He looked at them. We can rest, resupply, figure out the next move. Dakota spoke up. What if they're waiting for us? Then we fight. How? We're just kids. Elijah knelt down. You're not just kids. You're survivors. You've made it this far because you're strong. Don't forget that. The boy nodded, but fear still shadowed his face. They waited in the rocks until nightfall. The temperature dropped. The children shivered despite the blankets. Mary's injuries had reopened, blood seeping through the bandages. But they stayed quiet, stayed hidden. When darkness came, they moved. Elijah led, rifle ready. Ayanna brought up the rear, revolver in hand. Between them, the children and Mary walked single file, silent as ghosts. They moved through the forest for hours. No moon, just starlight filtering through the branches. Every sound made them freeze. Every shadow was a threat. But they kept moving. Just before dawn, they reached the town. It was barely more than a trading post and a dozen buildings, but it had people. Safety in numbers. Elijah found the only inn, knocked on the door. An old woman answered, squinting at them suspiciously. We need rooms, Elijah said, and discretion. She looked at his rifle, at the exhausted faces behind him, and nodded. Come in. They stumbled inside. The warmth hit them like a wave. The children immediately sat down, too tired to stand. Mary collapsed into a chair. The innkeeper, her name was Ruth, brought bread and hot coffee. She didn't ask questions, just provided what they needed. How long you staying? She asked Elijah. Just tonight, maybe 2. Running from something. Someone. She nodded. Lot of that going around. She handed him a key. 2 rooms. Upstairs. Lock the doors. I don't want trouble. You won't get any from us. It's the ones chasing you I'm worried about. Elijah paid her with some of Hart's money. She pocketed it and disappeared into the back. Upstairs they collapsed. The children fell asleep, immediately piled together like puppies. Mary lay down on one bed unconscious within seconds. Elijah and Ayanna sat by the window watching the street below. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked. "I don't know." "That's honest. I'm tired of lying." She took his hand. "If we don't, if something happens, I want you to know that these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life." "Don't talk like that." "I need to, in case I don't get another chance." She turned to face him. "You gave me hope. You gave my children a future. Whatever happens, that matters." "We're going to make it," he said fiercely. "All of us. Promise. Promise." But even as he said it, he heard the sound of horses outside. He looked out the window. 6 riders, the same ones from before. They were talking to someone on the street, pointing at the inn. "They found us," Ayanna whispered. Elijah grabbed his rifle. "Wake the children. We need to move." "Where?" "Out the back. There's always a back way." But when they got downstairs, 2 men were blocking the rear exit. Cordell's men. They were trapped. Elijah raised his rifle. "Get away from that door." The men drew their guns. "We don't want trouble. Just the woman." "Which one?" "Mrs. Cordell. The colonel wants his wife back." "She's not going anywhere." "Then we take her by force." "Try it." The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Ruth appeared from the kitchen, shotgun in hand. "Nobody's taking anybody from my inn," she said calmly. "Now get." The men looked at her, at Elijah, then slowly backed away. But one of them called back. "Cordell's on his way. He'll burn this whole place down if he has to." They left. But the threat lingered. Ruth lowered the shotgun. "You brought a world of hurt to my doorstep." "I'm sorry," Elijah said. "We'll leave." "Too late for that. If Cordell's coming, we make a stand." She looked at Ayanna, at the children. "I got 3 sons, lost 2 to men like Cordell. I won't lose anybody else." "You don't have to fight for us," Ayanna said. "No, but I'm going to anyway." Ruth moved to the window. "How long we got?" "Hour, maybe 2. Then we prepare." Within an hour, the whole town knew. And somehow, impossibly, they started to gather. The blacksmith, the school teacher, a handful of miners, even the old doctor carrying his medical bag like a weapon. "What's happening?" Elijah asked Ruth. "People are tired," she said simply. "Tired of men like Cordell taking what they want. You gave them a reason to fight back." Dakota tugged Elijah's sleeve. "Are we going to die?" Elijah knelt down, looked the boy in the eye. "Not if I can help it." "But you can't promise." "No, I can't." Dakota nodded slowly. "Then I'll fight too." "You're a kid." "I'm your son." The words came out fierce, proud. "Let me help." Elijah's chest tightened. He pulled the boy into a hug. "All right, but you do exactly what I say. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Cordell arrived at noon. He rode in with 20 men, armed and angry. But when he saw the townspeople gathered outside the inn, he paused. "What's this?" he called out. Ruth stepped forward. "This is us saying no." "No to what?" "To you, to your threats, to your cruelty." She gestured to the crowd. "We're done being afraid." Cordell laughed. "You think this changes anything? I own you people." "You own nothing," Elijah said, stepping out beside Ruth. "You tried to take my land, my family, my life, but you failed." "I haven't failed yet." "Yes, you have. Because even if you kill me today, these people will remember. They'll tell the story. And your name will be remembered for what it is, the name of a coward and a bully." Cordell's face went purple with rage. He raised his hand to signal his men, but Sheriff Tucker rode up, placed himself between Cordell and the crowd. "That's enough, Nathan. Move Wade." "No. I'm ordering you. You don't give me orders anymore." Tucker dismounted. You're under arrest for fraud, assault, and attempted murder. You can't arrest me. I just did. Cordell reached for his gun. Tucker was faster. He drew and fired not to kill, but to wound. The bullet caught Cordell in the shoulder, spun him around. He fell from his horse screaming. His men froze, uncertain. Tucker pointed his gun at them. Anyone else want to try? They lowered their weapons. Tucker looked at the crowd. It's over. The town erupted in cheers. People embraced. Children laughed. Elijah stood there, barely believing it was real. Ayanna appeared at his side, tears streaming. She threw her arms around him. We're safe, she sobbed. We're actually safe. He held her tight. We are. Mary Cordell stepped forward, looking at her husband bleeding in the dirt. She felt nothing. No pity, no love, no regret. Just relief. Thank you, she said to Tucker. He tipped his hat. Just doing my job, ma'am. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Cordell was tried and convicted. His land was seized, distributed to the people he'd stolen from. Mary divorced him, started over in a new town. She wrote Elijah once told him she'd found peace. Elijah and Ayanna went back to their cabin. They rebuilt the barn with help from the town. Dakota learned the blacksmith trade. Nina started school. The baby took her first steps on the porch Elijah had built with his own hands. And one night, when the children were asleep and the fire burned low, Ayanna turned to Elijah. Do you ever think about that night, the storm, every day? Do you regret opening the door? He took her hand, kissed it gently. Not once. Even with everything that happened. Especially because of everything that happened. He looked at her. You gave me a reason to live again. You gave us a life. We gave each other something better. Hope. She leaned against him, and they sat in the quiet warmth of the cabin they'd fought so hard to keep. Outside, snow began to fall again. But this time, it didn't feel like death. It felt like renewal, like the world washing itself clean, starting over. And inside that small cabin on the edge of Thornton's Ridge, a family built not by blood, but by choice, not by law, but by love, finally knew what it meant to be home. Because some doors are meant to be opened even in the coldest storms, and some promises are worth every sacrifice it takes to keep them.